I'm about 6 feet tall, skinny build. My curly hair and eyebrows are a dark brown, and my eyes are bright blue. A strange start to my story, I know, but it's only because I know the inevitable. It's going to happen again. I don't know where and I don't know who to, but I have a feeling it's been happening for a while. I'm just another small link in a long chain. If there's a photo in your home that matches the description above, you're in danger. All I can advise is that you get out. Get out as fast as you can and share my story with somebody, anybody who will believe you. I've written it out below as quickly as I could under the circumstances. I don't think I have much longer. It's going to find me soon. My mother died 2 months ago, lung cancer. We weren't very close, especially at the end, but I'd been the only family she didn't despise. Because of this, the majority of her possessions were left to me. This included an old blue truck, a storage unit full of tattered furniture and old clothes, and a split-level house at the end of a long country road. The house itself was in okay shape. There were some exterior walls that looked a bit rough, but it was old. Good bones, as they say. I decided I'd move into it, at least for the time being. I was between jobs and it felt like as good a place as any to crash for a little bit. I packed what few belongings I had from my crummy studio apartment and left the city in my rearview mirror. Things were normal for the first few days. It felt good to be away from the chaos that I'd grown accustomed to. My closest neighbor was 2 miles away, and I barely saw any cars drive by. I'd forgotten the value of silence from time to time. However, pretty quickly it got to the point where it was too silent. Soon, every creak made me jump. Every gust of wind sounded like an intruder, and it was driving me crazy. I decided that I needed a project, something to fill the silence, pass the time. I had a lot of it these days. I looked around at all of Mom's tacky inspirational wall hangings and her dated velvet furniture and decided that it felt too much like her in there. If I was going to live there, I was going to make it mine. I had a yard sale that had a pretty great turnout despite my isolated location. Pretty much everything went, and what didn't get sold got donated to a local thrift store. I shampooed the carpet, painted the walls, tended to the garden, all things that Mom probably hadn't done in years. By the time I was finished, the entire house almost looked brand new. I bought some new furniture with the yard sale money, threw up a few horror movie posters, and soon enough this place was starting to feel like mine. It had been easy to get rid of Mom's stuff because, quite frankly, most of it had been ugly. The only things that stuck around were her framed portraits, the ones that climbed the stairs. They were family photos, a dozen semi-familiar faces dotted them sporadically, and I found myself staring at them from time to time, wondering what they were up to now. It felt odd. I'd been alone for so long that the thought of a family this big being my family didn't make sense in my head. I started getting in the habit of greeting them each morning. I know it sounds weird, but grief is a strange thing. I felt comfort in it. As I'd been clearing out everything, I'd found a family photo album. Using that, I'd been able to match a lot of the names to faces. My aunt popped up a lot throughout the frames, as did my uncle and my grandma. I even saw myself as a baby a few times. It took a while, but soon I had each of them memorized. That's why I'd noticed the new photo almost instantly. Every single one of the photos had a thick, black frame, no matter the photo size. It gave the wall a nice, uniform look. Mother had liked them that way. The new one stood out from the rest. It was made up of plastic roses, each one a different shade of red. The image inside of the roses was of a woman. She was ice skating alone on some pond, surrounded by brush and thick snow. The photo was taken from a few yards away, through the branches of a dead tree. It was like the photographer had been crouching a few yards away, hiding. When I went to take the frame off the wall, I was met with wetness. The entire frame was covered in some sort of thick, clear goo that had started to pool on the stairs. My stomach churned at the sight of it. I took my shirt off and used it as a sort of glove to carry it to my kitchen table. I stared at it for a long time. Half of my brain was searching my early memories for the skating woman. Maybe she was a long-lost relative, or maybe a friend of Mother's. But that wouldn't explain the photo showing up out of nowhere. I'd passed that photo wall dozens of times, and I was almost certain that it hadn't been there before. It also wouldn't explain that disgusting goo. At that point, I was weirded out and confused, but I wasn't scared. I'd heard about strange things happening in the woods, how it can play tricks on your mind. That had to be it. I tossed the frame into the garbage. I didn't want it anywhere near me. I thought that'd be the end of it. Just a strange occurrence, nothing more. That morning, I skipped saying hello to the photos. There was an imposter, it didn't feel right. Later that day, I decided to take the truck into town and run a few errands I was putting off. I needed to get out of the house. It felt like I had that disgusting goo all over me even after a shower. Being in town helped a little bit, but not much. At the convenience store, the cashier picked up on my off mood. "You doing okay, sweetie? You look pale," she said, bagging my groceries. I lied and told her I was fine and forced our conversation to turn towards the weather. "I'm just getting sick of those storms," I said. "I know some people say they help them sleep, but not me." The woman gave me a weird look. "Storms? What storms? It's been bone dry for weeks. You sure you're okay?" "Oh, yeah, I'm fine," I stammered, grabbing my groceries. I hurried out of there and got in the truck. What did she mean by no storms? I'd been seeing lightning every night pretty much since I'd moved in. Maybe she lived in a different county. That had to be it. I drove around for an hour or two before heading back. The skating woman wouldn't leave my head. When I finally returned to the house, it had started to get dark. Nighttime out in the middle of nowhere was no joke. I brought the groceries in and put them away. I cooked a small chicken dinner, cleaned the dishes, and shut the house down for the night. I needed to sleep. It wasn't until I went to shut off the front porch lights that I noticed it. The photo of that skater. It was back in its place on the wall, right along with the others. A fresh layer of goo was dripping off of it like slimy teardrops. All right, I thought, now I'm scared. I didn't end up getting much sleep that night. I laid in bed and stared at the ceiling in a daze. The sounds of the old house sounded even louder in the dark. There wasn't a storm, at least not one that I noticed. In the morning, I checked every single nook and cranny in this house, looking for any sort of explanation on who'd moved the photo while I'd been gone. It had to be an intruder, but there were no signs of forced entry. The windows had been rusted shut years ago, so there was no chance of someone shimmying in that way. All of the doors had been locked as well, deadbolted. Outside, I saw no footprints or tire marks that weren't the truck's. Nobody else was here but me, at least according to the physical evidence. After a paranoid few hours of searching, I got fed up. I started a fire in the backyard and threw the photo into it. It almost sounded like it was screaming as it went up in smoke. I stood there until I was sure it was charred beyond repair before I doused the flame. The next day, I had someone from SPC Security come out and install a home alarm system, complete with a tablet that controlled its every move. It was very fancy. The man showed me how to arm and disarm the system and helped me create an access code. After he left, I felt a bit better. At least now I'd know if something in the house was moving while I wasn't. The photo hadn't returned, thank God, but I still felt weird about the photo wall. What had once given me comfort now felt wrong. I took the photos down and put them in a box that I shoved into a closet. The stairwell looked bare afterwards, like I had ripped all of its teeth out, but I felt good. It felt like I had things under control. That night I got into bed with the security tablet laying on my bedside table. I armed the house with my access code, and I drifted off to sleep as the lightning began once more. The alarm clock read 3:45 a.m. when I was startled awake. There was a sound. I squinted through the pitch black, still half asleep. I couldn't see anything. Whatever it was loud, really loud. The sound was like a blend of a sick, puking cat and a human cough. I rubbed my eyes with some force and peered into the darkness again. As my eyes began to adjust, I saw it. In the corner, something was there, crouching, vibrating, twitching. It was hard to make out its shape in the dark. It looked human. At least, it was big enough to be one. The only thing I could see was a tiny red light, right where its eyes should be. Terror had stapled me to the bed. Every fiber of my being wanted to tear out of there, but that thing was right by the bedroom door. This time it was louder. I saw it retch over like it had been punched in the stomach. It smacked its lips as its shoulders twitched back and forth with the sound of crunching, shifting bones. I noticed the security tablet sitting next to me. Earlier, the guy had said that if I hit the side button 3 times, the police would automatically be called. It was about a foot away from my reach. Moving as slow as I could manage, I stretched my arm across the bed. My fingers grazed the edge of the screen. I pressed down and started to drag it towards me, but instead of falling onto the bed, it fell onto the floor with a soft clunk. The shape in the corner jumped up onto its feet with a sharp, guttural inhale. It looked over at me. I made eye contact with its eyelight. We were both still for a moment, studying each other until it darted from the room and out into the hallway. I heard a faint, retching cough before the ear-piercing alarm began to go off. It must have moved enough to trigger it. With tears in my eyes, I reached down to the tablet and shakily clicked the side button 3 times. I waited out by the road for the cops. The further from the house, the better. Whatever it was still in there. Since I lived so far from town, it took longer for the local sheriff to reach me. I'd started to shiver by the time I saw the lights through the trees. This town was small enough to only have a sheriff and a deputy, and they'd both shown up for my call. "So, you saw an intruder in the house?" the sheriff asked. He seemed doubtful. "Nothing of that sort happened out here in the sticks. I was sure these guys had never dealt with any real crime." "Yes, I think he's still in there upstairs." The sheriff went inside to look around while the deputy surveyed the property. I remained in my spot by the mailbox. I probably looked crazy standing out there alone in nothing but my boxers. But I didn't care. My heart hadn't stopped its incessant beating, and a cold sweat had formed on my brow. I was just focused on not passing out in front of these cops. After what felt like years, the sheriff exited the house and met back up with his partner. They exchanged a few words I couldn't hear before coming to join me again by the road. The sheriff spoke first. "The house is clear, sir. I looked everywhere, checked all the windows, everything. No signs of forced entry." "I didn't saw nothing neither," the deputy tacked on. "I checked everywhere, no footprints, nothing. It's just you here, sir." I couldn't believe my ears. I wanted to force them back inside and make them check again, make them see what I saw. But I saw that look in the sheriff's eye, concern mixed with second-hand embarrassment. Here I was, a paranoid guy in his underwear lamenting about an intruder in his isolated house. If I kept it up, they might just take me back to the tiny station downtown. I decided to lie. "I'm embarrassed, officers. I apologize. My mom died recently and I must be seeing things. I'm exhausted." The officers looked at me, then at each other. The deputy took a step forward and put a hand on my bare shoulder. "It's all good, boy. You's mom was a town gem. Everyone loved her. We did at the station too. She had her fair share of calls down to the station. Was never anything though. Seems like the apple don't fall far from the tree, right, Sheriff?" The sheriff was not as polite as his deputy. "Get back inside and get some sleep. It looks like you need it. Good night, son. Sorry for your loss." I waved goodbye with a still shaking hand as they turned around in my driveway. On their way out, the detective slowed to a stop right by me. He held a flyer out the window. "Hey, I promised the family I'd hand these to everyone I came across. Keep an eye out, will ya?" They drove away and disappeared into the trees. I unfolded the flyer. It was a missing poster. There was a thick block of text above a photo. I recognized it, the face in the photo. I'd watched it burn in my fire pit earlier that day. Mother's house had become a threat. I couldn't sleep, I could barely eat. I stopped opening the windows in the morning and mainlined coffee to stay awake. I patrolled the house with a hammer in one hand and a baseball bat in the other. Overkill, I know, but what else could I do? After some digging online, I found an article about the missing woman. According to the Slow Turtle Gazette, she owned a local hobby store called So Chic and had been an avid ice skater. Just last year, she'd won a national title. In the attached photos, she was smiling the same way she'd been on my wall. I began to see that face everywhere, especially when I shut my eyes. It was etched into everything. I was in a strange position. What was I going to do? Go down to the station and tell those cops that something was living in my house, that it was leaving pictures of a missing woman on my walls. They'd definitely take me in then, especially considering my little stunt the other night. I didn't even have the damn photo anymore. Even if I did, having a previously unseen photo of a woman the day she went missing wasn't a good look. That wasn't all. There was something else that I kept coming back to, something that I just couldn't let go of. The angle, the way the photographer had been hiding, waiting. It did the same in my home for 3 days before it showed up again. I'd gone to the shop again that morning for food. The skater's missing posters were taped on every light pole in town. I tried not to look at them, but I still saw her in my periphery. That smile kept passing me at 30 miles per hour, punching me in the gut each time. Mindful of the groceries in the bed of the truck, I slowly upped my speed until I was back in the thick forest. Nobody bothered with the posters out here. As I approached the house, I noticed something in the front yard. Little bits of white were strewn across my front lawn, like confetti. I parked the truck and approached my porch with extreme caution. The little pieces were everywhere. I picked one up and held it up close, making eye contact with half of my aunt's smiling face. Mother's photos, once the heart of the house, had been torn to pieces and cast out carelessly on the grass. Some pieces got caught in the wind and blew up and out into the trees. The inside of the house was trashed. It was like a tornado had come through and destroyed everything in its path. The fridge had been ransacked, and food was thrown on the walls and smeared onto the windows. Furniture was upside down, pillows were ripped open and gutted. There was also the goo coating the floor, making it slippery. It was like the trail a snail leaves behind. I tried not to vomit as I made my way through the first floor, a butter knife clasped in my shaking hand. Don't laugh. It was the only weapon I could find on short notice. In the hall closet, the box that I'd put the family photos in was shredded. I checked to see if any survived the carnage, but there weren't any. That thing had taken each of the photos out of the frames and destroyed them. I couldn't figure out why though. What did it want with the frames? A sound upstairs caught my attention. The familiar coughing, followed by the clunk of something hitting the floor. I rounded the corner just in time to see something tumble down the stairs. It was the security tablet, shattered. I picked it up, wincing as a piece of broken glass got shoved into my thumb. It coughed again, closer this time. It was coming from upstairs. I dropped the tablet onto the ground where it landed with a splash and a pile of goo. There, at the top of the stairs, I saw it. It was shrouded in the darkness of the upstairs hallway, but it was there. I saw its skinny, vibrating body. I saw its bright red eye. I saw the photo wall. It was back. The frames were hanging again, although crooked. All 24 of them were there. They were covered in a dripping mess that ran down the wall in thick ropes. Now though, instead of the smiling faces of my family, all I saw looking back at me was me. They were all photos of me, sleeping. In each one, the flash was bright enough to wash my skin out. I remembered those nights, all that lightning. The thing retched and coughed, breaking me from my trance. It held up its bony hand to block the sun from its eye. There was something embedded in his palm, a sort of glass ball. It glistened in the light. The glass bulb in its palm was inches from my nose. I heard nothing besides the sound of a small whirring, like something winding up. It was the last thing I heard before I was blinded. I'm not too sure how to describe this next part. It's going to sound crazy, but it's the stone-cold truth. The thing in its hand. I guess you could say it's a camera. Or maybe it itself is a camera. I still don't really know for sure. When I came to, the thing had started shaking. It held onto the railing for support as it jerked from left to right, sending dribbles of its spit all over the entryway. I'd backed myself into the corner of the room, as far away as I could get. My head was pounding. Terrified, I crossed my arms and folded my legs up into my chest. I wanted to make myself as small as possible. I wanted it all to be over. I wanted my mother. Through my shaking fingers, I watched the thing stumble its way down the final few steps on all fours. It was still coughing, arching its back like a sick cat with each heave. After a few heavy purges of goo, I saw something fall out of its throat and onto my carpet. It was a photo. It was my photo. My horrified face took up the entire page. The thing grabbed the paper from the ground and flattened it. It looked at me with that bright eye for a few moments before reaching over and tossing it in my lap. I noticed what looked to be a smile creep up on its thin lips. It seemed proud of its work. Before I could even think about my next move, I swung the butter knife. It landed with a dull thunk somewhere on the side of its thick head. An inhuman wail spilled from its wet mouth as it backed into the wall with force. The crash rattled some of the photos of my sleeping body tumbling off the wall. I snuck past the thing as it tugged at the knife handle in its face, taking the steps 2 at a time. An armoire that my mother had bought ages ago still stood in her old craft room upstairs. It was big enough for me to just barely fit inside. I climbed in and shut the doors quietly. I've been in here ever since. Like I said at the start, there isn't much time for me. There aren't a lot of hiding places in this house. It's sure to pull open the armoire doors at some point in time. What happens to me then, I'm not sure. Perhaps I'll face the same fate as the skater. Perhaps I'll find a way to escape, although that seems doubtful. There's a crack in the door of the armoire. As I've been writing, I've peered through it and witnessed that thing pass through this room a few times. Each time it brings one of the frames from the wall and adds it to a line it started on the floor. It's laying each one out. At first I wasn't sure what it was up to, but I think I know now. I remember the skater's photo, the frame of roses that it lived in. I think that thing forced her to choose a frame for her photo, and now it was setting me up to do the same. Not that I'd have much choice. Mother had liked the uniform black after all. Please remember, I'm about 6 feet tall, skinny build. My curly hair and eyebrows are a dark brown and my eyes are bright blue. If you see me in your home in a thick black frame, be cautious. Tell my story and the skater's too, whoever she is. And if this thing comes for you next, I hope you can kill it. I only wounded it, it seems.